You think that receipt means something? You think a piece of paper makes you innocent? The question hung in the Georgia heat like a verdict already delivered. Delores Holloway stood in the Greenfield Market parking lot with a grocery bag in her arms, the receipt still visible in her cardigan pocket, and the familiar sensation of being treated as an intruder in a town where she had lived for 43 years. The man in uniform towered over her by a full head. The badge on his chest read Garrett. His eyes did not meet hers. They looked through her as though she were an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be addressed. 4:47 p.m. The Georgia sun beat down on the asphalt, sending waves of heat rippling across the parking lot. Delores had been standing here for 14 minutes, waiting for her son to pick her up, doing nothing except existing. And that was her crime. The radio on Garrett's shoulder crackled with a female dispatcher's voice, flat and mechanical. Unit 14, Greenfield Market, possible 10-32 in progress. Black female, late 60s, gray cardigan. Caller reports suspicious behavior near pharmacy entrance. Suspicious behavior. Standing. Waiting for her son. Holding a bag of groceries she had already paid for. Looking out at the parking lot. Garrett stepped forward. No greeting. No introduction of name or agency. Just a single command. The bag. Open it. Delores looked down at what she was holding. Milk. Bread. Blood pressure medication from the pharmacy counter. The receipt was right there, printed clearly with the store name, the time, the total paid. I have my receipt right here, officer. Garrett did not look at the receipt. His left hand closed around her wrist. His right hand reached for the bag. Somewhere in the back of the parking lot, a gray sedan sat motionless. The man behind the wheel did not open his door, did not shout, did not rush forward. He simply watched. And in a small notebook balanced on his knee, he wrote, the date, the time, the location, the name on the badge, the unit number on the patrol car, the specific angle of Garrett's grip on the elderly woman's wrist. His handwriting was neat, precise, unhurried, as though he had done this before. Delores tried to pull her arm back. The grip tightened. You are hurting me. The slap came before she could finish the sentence. Not a push, not a shove. An open palm strike across the face that sent her stumbling backward, her feet tangling, her body falling. Her cheekbone hit the asphalt. The grocery bag spilled. The bottle of blood pressure medication rolled under a nearby car. And in the gray sedan 20 meters away, the man with the notebook turned to a fresh page. He did not get out. He did not call for help. He kept writing. Delores lifted her head, blood running from the corner of her mouth. Her eyes found the sedan, found the silhouette of her son behind the windshield. Marcus. Her Marcus. Sitting there, watching. Why was he not moving? The notebook page turned again. The pen kept scratching, and Deputy Vance Garrett stood over a 68-year-old woman bleeding on hot asphalt, satisfied that order had been restored. 3 days earlier, Delores Holloway woke at 5:47 a.m., the same time she had woken every morning for the past 40 years of teaching elementary school. Retirement had not broken the habit. Perhaps nothing ever would. The house on Maple Street was small, white paint peeling on the shutters, wooden fence in need of repair. She had lived here since 1981, raised her son in the bedroom at the end of the hall, buried her husband from the living room in 2019. The neighborhood had changed around her. New families moving in, old ones moving out. The demographics shifting in ways that made some people uncomfortable and others vocal about their discomfort. Delores made coffee. 2 cups. She set them both on the kitchen table. The second cup was for Marcus. Her son came home every weekend without fail. Never late by more than 15 minutes. Never forgot to call ahead. It was the kind of reliability that made neighbors comment. That boy of yours is something else, Dorothy Chen from 3 houses down had said last month. Shoes lined up by the door, food in the fridge labeled with expiration dates. Who raised him like that? Delores had smiled. He works in an office in Atlanta, paperwork, files, boring stuff, he says. She did not know much more than that. Marcus did not talk about his work in detail, and she had learned not to ask. Some children grew up to share everything with their parents. Others built walls. Marcus had always been a wall builder, but he came home every weekend. He fixed things around the house. He sat with her on the porch and watched the sunset over Maple Street. That was enough. It had to be enough. By 6:15 p.m. that Friday, the gray sedan pulled up in front of the house. Marcus stepped out wearing a navy polo shirt, khaki pants, leather shoes worn at the heels. He looked like an insurance adjuster, or a mid-level accountant, the kind of man you would pass on the street without a second glance. That was the point, though Delores did not know it yet. Before entering the house, Marcus paused on the sidewalk. 3 seconds. His eyes swept the street in a single smooth motion. Cars parked along the curb. A jogger turning the corner. The security camera on the house across the way, angled toward the intersection. He noted everything, filed it away, then smiled and walked through the front door to hug his mother. "Mama, that fence needs repainting." "Then you can repaint it this weekend." "Already bought the paint. It is in the trunk." Delores shook her head. Too neat, too prepared, always 3 steps ahead of every problem. She did not ask how he knew the fence needed repainting when he had not been here in 7 days. She did not ask why his eyes had swept the street like a man checking for surveillance. She did not ask about the slight bulge under his polo shirt at the small of his back that had not been there last month. Some questions, she had learned, were better left unasked. If this satisfying drama is keeping you hooked, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss what happens next. That evening, they sat on the back porch eating dinner as the sun went down. Dolores's phone buzzed. A notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. She read it. Her face darkened. Lila Macklin posted again. Marcus looked up from his plate. What did she say this time? Sergeant Lila Macklin. 12 years with the Morrow County Sheriff's Office. 9 years living 6 houses down from Delores on Maple Street. She ran the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group like a personal fiefdom, and her posts had a particular flavor that everyone recognized but few acknowledged. Delores read the post aloud. Reminder to everyone. If you see unfamiliar individuals walking in the area after 8 p.m., please call the non-emergency line. Better safe than sorry. Pay special attention to those who do not appear to belong here. The words unfamiliar and do not appear to belong were capitalized. The meaning was clear to anyone paying attention. Marcus reached over and took his mother's phone. He read the post again. Then he opened a notes app and typed something quickly before handing the phone back. What did you just write? Delores asked. Habit. My job requires a lot of documentation. He did not explain further, and she did not push. But later that night, when Delores was asleep, Marcus sat in his childhood bedroom with his laptop open. On the screen was a folder labeled 2023-11MC. Inside were screenshots, dates, names, a timeline stretching back 14 months. Lila Macklin's name appeared 17 times. Deputy Vance Garrett's name appeared 43 times. And at the top of the document, a header that Delores would never see. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Pattern or Practice Investigation. Authorization number CRT 2022-0891. Lead Agent Marcus Holloway. He closed the laptop at 2:14 a.m. Set his alarm for 6:30. Placed his shoes in a neat row by the door. Then he lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling of the room where he had grown up, and wondered how much longer he could keep lying to his mother. Saturday morning, 8:17 a.m. Marcus was repainting the fence when the patrol car rolled by. It slowed as it passed the house. The driver, a white man in his early 40s with a face like weathered stone, looked at Marcus through the window, looked at the fence, looked at the house. Deputy Vance Garrett. 12 years on the force. 7 complaints of excessive force, all cleared. a reputation for being thorough. Thorough in Morrow County meant something different than the dictionary definition. The car did not stop. Garrett did not wave. He simply observed, cataloged, and moved on. Marcus did not look up from his painting, but in the reflection of the front window he tracked the patrol car until it turned the corner and disappeared. A normal person would have watched the car directly. Curiosity, nervousness, something. Marcus watched through a reflection, indirect, professional, as though being observed was not new to him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from a number not saved in his contacts. Unit 14 passed your location at 0817. Maintain cover. Report any direct contact. Marcus typed back, confirmed. No contact. Observation only. He pocketed the phone and continued painting. Stroke by stroke, neat, even, controlled. The fence would look perfect by noon. That was what mattered. That was what people would remember. Marcus Holloway, the good son who came home every weekend and did chores for his elderly mother. No one would remember the way his eyes never quite relaxed, the way his hand occasionally drifted toward his right hip before catching itself, the way he positioned himself with his back never fully toward the street. No one saw those things. That was also the point. That afternoon, Sergeant Lila Macklin stopped by for a neighborly visit. She appeared at the front door at 3:22 p.m., wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself with the unmistakable posture of someone accustomed to authority. Blonde hair pulled back tight, smile that did not reach her eyes. Delores, it has been too long. I saw your son's car outside and thought I would say hello. Delores stood in the doorway, blocking entrance without appearing to do so. 40 years of teaching had given her instincts for managing difficult personalities. Marcus is out back, Lila, working on the fence. Oh, how nice. Such a good son. Macklin's eyes drifted past Delores into the house, scanning, always scanning. I do not think I have ever properly met him. What does he do in Atlanta? Office work, paperwork, files, boring stuff. Is that right? And he comes home every weekend? Every weekend. Macklin's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. You know, Delores, the HOA has a policy about extended guests. Anyone staying more than 3 nights should be reported to the management board. Delores had lived in this house since before the HOA existed. There was no such policy. Both women knew it. Marcus is my son, Lila, not a guest. Of course, of course. Macklin raised her hands in mock surrender. I just want to make sure everyone follows the rules. That is how we keep the neighborhood safe. From the backyard, Marcus appeared at the corner of the house, paintbrush in hand, white specks on his polo shirt. His eyes met Macklin's for exactly 2 seconds before sliding away with practiced disinterest. Mama, do we have more blue tape? I need to cover the trim. In the garage, second shelf. Thank you. He nodded at Macklin with the polite blankness of a man who had already forgotten her face. Afternoon, ma'am. He disappeared around the corner. Macklin watched him go. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not suspicion exactly. More like the instinct of a predator, sensing that something in the environment was not quite prey. He seems attentive. He is a good boy. I am sure he is. Macklin stepped back from the doorway. Well, I will let you get back to your day. Remember, Delores, anything unusual, just call me directly. That is what neighbors are for. She walked back toward her house, pulling out her phone as she went. Inside, Delores let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. In the backyard, Marcus had stopped painting. He stood motionless at the corner of the house, head tilted slightly, listening to Macklin's footsteps fade down the sidewalk. Then he pulled out his own phone and typed a message. Secondary contact with S. Macklin at 1522, social surveillance on family members, pattern consistent with file documentation, no direct provocation. The reply came 30 seconds later, noted. Continue passive observation. Do not engage unless engaged. Marcus deleted both messages, cleared his recent calls, then went back to painting the fence. The blue tape was exactly where his mother said it would be. He had known that before he asked. The question had simply been an excuse to see who was at the door without appearing to care. 14 months of this. 14 months of pretending to be someone he was not. 14 months of watching his mother live next to people who saw her as a problem to be managed rather than a neighbor to be respected. 14 months, and the file was almost ready. But almost was not enough. He needed them to make a mistake. A real one. Something that could not be explained away or buried in paperwork. He just never expected the mistake to happen to his own mother. Sunday. The day it happened. Marcus received a call at 4:15 p.m. from a number he had been waiting 14 months to see. He was in his childhood bedroom, laptop open, reviewing surveillance footage from a body camera malfunction that had occurred 6 weeks earlier. A man named Terrence Odom had been pulled over for a broken taillight. 62 seconds of footage existed. Then the camera failed. Odom arrived at the hospital with a broken orbital bone and no explanation of how it happened. The number that appeared on Marcus's phone was a Washington, D.C. area code, a number he had memorized but never saved. He answered on the second ring. Holloway. The voice on the other end was female, mid-40s, clipped and professional. We have movement. Internal chatter suggests Garrett is on rotation in your sector this afternoon. Multiple targets possible. We need eyes on any contact he initiates. Understood. My mother is currently at Greenfield Market. I am scheduled to pick her up at 5. A pause. Then, your mother is a civilian, Agent Holloway. If there is any risk of contact, you should alter her schedule. Marcus looked out the window. The gray sedan sat in the driveway, waiting. With respect, ma'am, altering her schedule would be unusual behavior. Garrett knows this neighborhood. He knows who belongs and who does not. Any deviation from pattern could raise flags. Another pause. Longer this time. Your call, Agent. But if contact occurs, you maintain cover. Do not intervene. Do not identify. Document and report. Understood? Understood. 14 months, Holloway. We are close. Do not throw it away. The line went dead. Marcus sat motionless for 30 seconds. Then he closed his laptop, tucked the notebook into his pocket, and walked out to the car. His mother was waiting for him. Standing in front of a grocery store, holding a bag of milk and bread and blood pressure medication. She did not know she was bait. And Marcus told himself that she would never have to find out. He was wrong. 4:47 p.m. Greenfield Market parking lot. Marcus pulled the sedan into a space at the far end of the lot, 20 meters from the pharmacy entrance, clear sightline to where his mother stood. She was exactly where she said she would be. Gray cardigan, grocery bag, standing near lamppost number 7, watching for his car. She waved when she saw him. He waved back. And then the patrol car appeared. Unit 14, Deputy Vance Garrett, responding to a call that should never have been made. Marcus watched as the car pulled into the lot, watched as it angled toward his mother, watched as Garrett stepped out and approached her without introduction, without explanation, without the basic courtesy that procedure required. His hand moved toward the door handle, then stopped. 14 months. 43 documented incidents. 6 witnesses who had agreed to testify if DOJ could guarantee protection. A pattern so clear that even the most skeptical federal judge would have to acknowledge it. And now his mother was standing in the middle of it. He could get out, identify himself, shut this down before it escalated. But if he did that, Garrett would walk. Macklin would walk. The entire structure that had been terrorizing this community for years would remain intact, protected by the blue wall and the qualified immunity and the endless procedural barriers that kept people like Garrett in uniform. One intervention, one blown cover, and everyone who had suffered before would have suffered for nothing. Marcus's hand dropped from the door handle. He opened the notebook, and he began to write. The slap echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Marcus watched his mother fall, watched her cheekbones strike the asphalt, watched the grocery bag spill, the medication bottle rolling away into the shadows beneath a parked car. His pen did not stop moving. Time, 17:11. Location, Greenfield Market, Section D. Incident, Deputy V. Garrett initiated physical contact with civilian D. Holloway without verbal warning or de-escalation attempt. Contact type, open hand strike to left side of face. Civilian fell backward, struck ground. Visible bleeding from mouth area. The words were clinical, detached, professional. Inside, something was screaming. Garrett stood over Delores now, hand on his service weapon, shouting orders that did not make sense. Get on the ground. She was already on the ground. Do not resist. She was not resisting. Stop moving. She was barely conscious. Marcus pulled out his phone. Not to call 911. Those calls were recorded, and his voice would be on file. Instead, he sent a text. Incident confirmed. Target 3 initiated contact. Victim DH. Evidence accumulating. Awaiting instruction. The reply came faster than he expected. Maintain position. Do not break cover. Recording assets being deployed. Recording assets. Somewhere nearby, someone else was watching. Someone with a camera that would capture what Marcus's position could not. It should have been comforting. It was not. His mother was bleeding on the asphalt, and he was sitting in an air-conditioned car taking notes. This was the job. This was what he had signed up for. This was how systemic change happened. Not through individual heroics, but through patient documentation of patterns that could not be denied. He had told himself that for 14 months. It had never felt like a lie until now. At 5:12 p.m., Marcus finally stepped out of the car. Slowly, hands visible. The posture of a man who knew exactly how quickly a traffic stop could become a tragedy. Officer, I am the family member of that woman. Can I help in some way? Garrett spun around. His hand stayed on his weapon. Stop right there. Do not move. Marcus stopped. Did not move. I am just here to pick up my mother, officer. That is her on the ground. Delores Holloway. She lives on Maple Street. I can provide identification if you need it. Garrett's eyes swept over him. Navy polo, khaki pants, worn shoes, a face that radiated harmlessness. You stay right there until I say otherwise. You understand? Yes, officer. The ambulance arrived at 5:31 p.m. 2 EMTs loaded Delores onto a stretcher while Garrett watched with his arms crossed. He had not called for backup, had not secured the scene, had not taken statements from the half-dozen witnesses who had gathered at the edges of the parking lot. Sloppy, overconfident. Exactly what the file predicted. Marcus approached one of the EMTs. Which hospital are you taking her to? Morrow County General. You can follow behind. Marcus nodded. He walked back to the sedan, got in, and started the engine. Before pulling out, he took one last look at the scene. Garrett was talking to the store manager now, gesturing broadly, constructing a narrative that would appear in his report within hours. The narrative would not match what happened. It never did. But this time, there would be other records, other witnesses, other eyes. And when the time came, Deputy Vance Garrett would discover that the boring office worker from Atlanta had been watching him all along. Morrow County General Hospital, 6:47 p.m. Delores lay in a bed in the emergency department, gauze taped to her cheek, her left arm wrapped in a compression bandage from wrist to elbow. The doctor had confirmed a fractured cheekbone and soft tissue damage consistent with blunt force trauma, consistent with being slapped by a man twice her size. Marcus sat beside her, notebook closed now, hands folded in his lap. Mama, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. From the beginning. Dolores's eyes were tired, not just from the pain medication, from something deeper. You saw it, Marcus. You were right there in the parking lot. I need to hear it in your words. Why? So you can write it down in that little book of yours? The question hit harder than she intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. Mama, I saw you, baby, sitting in that car, watching, not moving. Her voice cracked. I thought maybe you did not see. Maybe you were on the phone, but then I saw your face through the windshield. You saw everything, and you just sat there. Marcus did not look away. He could not afford to. I could not intervene. Could not? Or would not? The silence stretched between them. 43 years of trust, fraying at the edges. There are things I cannot explain right now, Marcus said finally. Things that would not make sense even if I tried. But I need you to believe me when I say that what happened today is going to matter. Not just for you, for everyone Garrett has ever hurt. Delores stared at her son, the boy she had raised, the man she did not fully recognize anymore. What kind of work do you really do, Marcus? Paperwork, files, boring stuff. The same answer, the same deflection. But this time, Delores heard the weight behind it. You are lying to me. Marcus finally looked down. Yes, Mama, I am. The admission hung in the air. He did not elaborate. She did not push. Some truths were better discovered than told. The door opened. A woman walked in. Mid-50s, blonde hair, uniform shirt with sergeant stripes. Lila Macklin. Dud. This story is just getting started. If you are watching on YouTube, drop a comment below telling us what you think Marcus is hiding. And if you are listening on Spotify, follow the show so you get notified when Part 2 drops. Macklin stood in the doorway with an expression of calculated concern. Delores, I heard what happened and rushed right over. How are you feeling? Marcus rose from his chair. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, weight centering, hands dropping to his sides. A stance that was not aggressive, but was very far from passive. Sergeant Macklin, I was not aware you were on duty tonight. I am not. This is a personal visit. Delores is my neighbor. Of course. How thoughtful. The words were polite. The tone was not. Macklin noticed. And you are the son, Marcus, right? We met yesterday. We did. Your mother tells me you work in Atlanta. Some kind of office job? Paperwork, files. He paused. Boring stuff. The exact same phrase, delivered the exact same way, like a recording played back. Macklin's eyes narrowed slightly. You seem very calm for someone whose mother was just assaulted. Panic rarely helps a situation, Sergeant. No, I suppose it does not. She turned to Delores. I spoke with Vance on my way over. He is very shaken up. He says there was a misunderstanding, that you became aggressive and he had to defend himself. Dolores's hand tightened on the bedsheet. I asked him why he was stopping me. That was all. He said you struck him. I did not touch him. Well, Macklin's smile was sympathetic and completely false. These situations can be confusing. Memory plays tricks, especially after trauma. I am sure once you have had time to rest, you will remember things more clearly. Marcus stepped between Macklin and the bed, not blocking her view entirely, just inserting himself into the space. Sergeant, my mother has had a long day. Perhaps this conversation can continue another time. Of course. I did not mean to intrude. Macklin reached into her pocket and produced a card. But Delores, if you remember anything differently, or if you want to talk about what really happened, you can reach me at this number, day or night. She set the card on the bedside table. Then she looked at Marcus one more time. Something was bothering her. He could see it in the way her eyes kept returning to his hands, his posture, the set of his shoulders. She was reading him the way a cop reads a suspect, and she was not finding what she expected. Take care of your mother, Mr. Holloway. I intend to. Macklin left. The door clicked shut behind her. Marcus waited a full 60 seconds before speaking. "Mama, whatever she asks you, do not answer without a lawyer present." "A lawyer? Marcus, I did not do anything wrong." "I know, but they are going to say you did, and when they do, you need someone in your corner who knows how to fight back." Delores looked at her son, at the hardness in his eyes that had not been there when he was a boy. "Who are you, Marcus? Who have you become?" He did not answer. Could not answer. Not yet. But soon. Soon the masks would come off, and Delores would finally see the son she had raised, and the man he had become, and the impossible choice he had made in that parking lot. Soon. But not tonight. 48 hours later, the narrative war began. It started on Facebook. The Morrow County Community Watch Group, 1,800 members strong, moderated by Sergeant Lila Macklin. A new post appeared at 9:14 a.m. on Tuesday. The author was listed as Concerned Citizen 31. No profile picture. No post history. An account created specifically for this purpose. Important update. Greenfield Market incident. Information from reliable sources indicates that the altercation at Greenfield Market was initiated by the suspect. The deputy involved was acting in self-defense after being struck first. The individual in question has a history of unstable behavior and should not be trusted. Let our officers do their jobs. Do not believe those who want to tear apart our community. Within 4 hours, the post had 123 likes and 47 comments. The comments followed a predictable pattern. "Thank you for the truth. Our officers risk their lives every day. Why do people always blame the police?" Marcus read the post on his laptop in his childhood bedroom. Then he opened his documentation file and added a new entry. Coordinated disinformation campaign initiated 48 hours post-incident. Source appears to be internal to MCSO. Language patterns consistent with previous posts attributed to Sergeant L. Macklin. Screenshot saved, archived, cross-referenced. He did not show the post to his mother. She had enough to worry about. But the damage was already being done. Delores had taught in Morrow County schools for 40 years. She knew half the families in town. And now those families were reading that she had unstable behavior and had attacked a police officer. The isolation had begun. The following Monday, it escalated. Delores had been volunteering at Morrow Elementary School library since her retirement. 2 afternoons a week, she read to children in the story corner. It was the closest she came to her old life, and she treasured every minute of it. At 10:45 a.m., the principal called her into the office. Patricia Weathers had been one of Dolores's colleagues for 20 years. They had eaten lunch together, celebrated birthdays together, mourned together when Patricia's husband passed. Now Patricia sat behind her desk with her hands clasped and her eyes refusing to meet Dolores's. "Delores, I am so sorry to have to do this. The school board received a complaint." "A complaint about what?" "About your suitability to work with children, given recent events." Delores felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Patricia, I was assaulted. I did not do anything wrong." I know that. But the complaint came from a county office. And until the situation is resolved, the board has asked me to suspend your volunteer privileges." "What county office?" Patricia hesitated. Then she slid a printed email across the desk. The sender's address was redacted, but the domain was visible. @morrowcounty.gov. From the county to the school board. Subject: Volunteer background concern. The email stated that Delores Holloway was currently under investigation for disorderly conduct and assault on a public official, and recommended that her access to children be suspended pending resolution. There was no investigation. Delores was the victim, not the suspect, but the email had been sent. The seed had been planted. "Patricia, this is a lie. You know me. 38 years I worked in this building." "I know, Delores, but my hands are tied. The board makes these decisions, not me." Patricia finally looked up. Her eyes were wet. "I am so sorry. I wish there was something I could do." Delores walked out of the school at 11:15 a.m. She did not cry. She did not scream. She had been a teacher too long to fall apart in public. But in the car, alone, she let herself feel it. 43 years in this town, a lifetime of service, and in less than a week they had turned her into a pariah. That evening, Marcus filed a formal complaint with the Morrow County Internal Affairs Division. He drove to the sheriff's office at 4:30 p.m., dressed in his usual forgettable attire. Polo shirt, khaki pants, the look of a man who filed insurance claims for a living. The woman at the front desk directed him to the IA intake office on the second floor. He climbed the stairs, noting the camera positions, the door lock mechanisms, the sight lines from each corner. Professional habit. Even here. The IA office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a computer that looked like it had not been updated since 2015. Behind the desk sat a man in his late 50s with a nameplate that read, Captain Dorian Whitmore, Legal Liaison. Whitmore looked up from his paperwork with the expression of someone whose lunch had been interrupted. "Help you? I am here to file a formal complaint regarding an incident involving Deputy Vance Garrett on the afternoon of November 12th at Greenfield Market." Whitmore's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Your name?" "Marcus Holloway. The victim is my mother, Delores Holloway." "Have a seat, Mr. Holloway." Marcus sat. Whitmore pulled out a form and began filling in basic information. Date, time, location, names of parties involved. "I have reviewed the preliminary report from Deputy Garrett," Whitmore said without looking up. "He states he was responding to a suspicious person call and that your mother became combative during the encounter. My mother is 68 years old and weighs 130 pounds. She was holding a grocery bag. Deputy Garrett did not identify himself or state the reason for his approach before initiating physical contact." Whitmore finally looked up. "And you know this how?" "I was present in the parking lot. I witnessed the entire incident." "You witnessed it, and you did not intervene?" The question was loaded. Marcus recognized the trap. "I was approximately 20 meters away. By the time I understood what was happening, my mother was already on the ground. I approached after Deputy Garrett had secured the scene." "Secured the scene?" Whitmore's voice was flat. "Interesting choice of words." "It is the terminology used in police reports, Captain." Whitmore set down his pen. He leaned back in his chair and studied Marcus with the careful attention of a man who spent his career reading people. "What do you do for a living, Mr. Holloway?" "I work in an office in Atlanta. Paperwork. Files." "What kind of office?" "Administrative services. Nothing exciting." "And yet you know police terminology. You know how to file an IA complaint. You cite specific policies and procedures as though you have read them before." Marcus did not blink. "I read a lot, Captain, and when someone assaults my mother, I make sure I understand her options." Silence stretched between them. Whitmore was trying to find the angle, the inconsistency, the crack in the facade. Marcus gave him nothing. "Very well, Mr. Holloway. Your complaint will be processed according to departmental policy. You should expect a response within 90 days. 90 days. That is the standard timeline. And Deputy Garrett's status during this period? Unchanged. He remains on active duty pending investigation. I see. Marcus stood. I would like a receipt confirming my complaint has been filed. Whitmore's jaw tightened, but he printed the receipt and handed it over. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Holloway. We take these matters very seriously. I am sure you do. Marcus walked out of the building at 5:15 p.m. He did not look back, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that Whitmore was already picking up the phone. The complaint would disappear into a file cabinet. The 90-day timeline would stretch to 180 days, then 270, then indefinitely, unless something changed. And something was about to change. 2 weeks after the incident at Greenfield Market, Delores answered her front door at 6:14 a.m. to find 4 deputies standing on her porch. One of them was Vance Garrett. He held a piece of paper in his hand. His face was expressionless, but his eyes carried something that looked almost like pleasure. "Delores Holloway, you are under arrest for assault on a federal officer in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 111. Delores stared at him. The words did not make sense. She was the victim. She had been hit. She had been the one bleeding on the asphalt. "This is a mistake. I did not assault anyone." "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Vance, you know me. I taught your nephew in 3rd grade. This is insane." Garrett's expression did not change. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Marcus appeared in the hallway behind his mother. He had heard the knock, heard the voices, and understood immediately what was happening. 18 U.S.C. Section 111. Assault on a federal officer. That was not a state charge. That was federal jurisdiction. How were they claiming federal jurisdiction? He stepped forward, slowly, hands visible. "Officers, can I see the warrant?" One of the other deputies handed it over. Marcus read it quickly, his mind cataloging every detail. Warrant number 2023 MC 4471. Charge: assault on federal officer. Basis: Deputy Garrett claimed he was performing duties in support of an FBI joint task force at the time of the incident, thereby elevating the offense to federal status. FBI Joint Task Force. The irony was almost beautiful. Marcus knew every federal task force operating in Georgia. He had direct access to their personnel rosters. There was no joint task force operating in Morrow County. There had not been one in over 2 years. Garrett was lying, on paper, under oath, and he had just handed Marcus exactly what he needed. "Mama, do not say anything. I am going to get you a lawyer." Delores looked at her son. Her eyes asked the question she could not voice. "Why is this happening? What did I do?" Marcus could not answer. Not in front of these witnesses. "I will be at the courthouse within the hour, Mama. Do not answer any questions until I get there." Garrett stepped forward with the handcuffs. "Let us go, ma'am." Delores turned, placed her hands behind her back, felt the cold metal close around her wrists. 68 years old, 43 years living in this town, 38 years teaching its children, and now she was being led out her front door in handcuffs while neighbors peered through their curtains. The patrol car pulled away at 6:32 a.m. Marcus stood on the porch, watching until it disappeared around the corner. Then he went inside and made a phone call. The number was a Washington, D.C. area code, the same number that had called him 3 days before the incident. It rang twice before the same female voice answered. "Holloway, report. Target 3 escalated. They arrested DH this morning. Charge is 18 U.S.C. 111. They are claiming federal jurisdiction through a joint task force that does not exist." A pause. Then, "They put that in writing?" "Signed warrant. I have photographs." "That is perjury, and filing a false federal charge is itself a federal offense." "I know." "This changes the timeline, Agent. We can move now if you are ready." Marcus closed his eyes. 14 months of work, 43 documented incidents, 6 witnesses ready to testify, and his mother in handcuffs. "Not yet." "Not yet? Holloway, your mother just got arrested on fabricated charges. And if I reveal myself now, Garrett catches a perjury charge and walks on everything else. The pattern disappears. The other victims get nothing." "Your mother is not a victim in a case file. She is your mother." "I am aware of that, ma'am." His voice was steady. It did not match what he was feeling. "If we move now, we get Garrett, maybe Whitmore. The system stays intact. If we wait, if we let them keep building their case, we catch them in active conspiracy. That is when DOJ can open a pattern or practice investigation. That is when real change happens. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, how long? I need them to take this to preliminary hearing. I need discovery. I need them to commit their narrative to official court records. That could take months. Yes. And your mother stays charged with a federal crime for the duration. Yes. Another pause. When the voice came back, it was softer than before. Are you sure about this, Marcus? No one would blame you for pulling out. Marcus looked out the window. At the empty driveway where his mother's car should have been. At the fence he had just repainted. At the neighborhood that had turned against her. 14 months, ma'am. I am not throwing it away, not even for this. Understood. I will arrange representation for DH, someone discreet. They will not know about the investigation. Thank you. And Holloway, take care of yourself. This kind of work, it costs something. The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone. For a long moment he did not move. Then he opened his laptop and added a new entry to the file. Subject arrested on fabricated federal charge. Warrant claims Joint Task Force jurisdiction. No such task force exists. Evidence of perjury, conspiracy, and deprivation of rights under color of law. Timeline accelerating. Pattern documentation continues. Personal note. 14 months. 3 more to go. Hold the line. Hold the yam. He closed the laptop and went to get his car keys. His mother was waiting for him at the courthouse. Before we continue, hit that like button if you are invested in this story. Your support helps us bring more content like this to the channel. The Morrow County Courthouse was a 3-story brick building that had stood since 1952. It smelled like old paper and older grudges. Marcus arrived at 8:45 a.m. The arraignment was scheduled for 9. He took a seat in the back row of Courtroom 2, the same position he would occupy for every hearing over the next several months. Visible but not prominent. Present but not participating. The room filled slowly. Bailiffs, court reporters, a handful of spectators who attended every session like it was their morning television. And at the prosecution table, sitting next to the assistant district attorney, Deputy Vance Garrett. He looked relaxed, confident, a man who believed he was protected by a system designed to serve people like him. At 9:15 a.m., the door opened and Delores was let in. She wore the same clothes from this morning, now wrinkled from hours in a holding cell. Her wrists were free of the handcuffs, but the marks remained. She saw Marcus in the back row. Their eyes met. He gave her a small nod. Hold on. I am here. This is not over. The judge entered. An older white man with silver hair and the permanent frown of someone who had seen too many cases to believe in anyone's innocence. Case number 2023 MC 4471. United States versus Delores Marie Holloway. Charge of assault on a federal officer under Title 18, United States Code Section 111. How does the defendant plead? Delores stood. Her voice was steady, even if her hands were not. Not guilty, Your Honor. Very well. Bail? The ADA stood. The people request bail of $15,000. The defendant has deep ties to the community, but the nature of the offense, an attack on law enforcement, suggests flight risk. Your Honor. A new voice, from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. A woman walked down the center aisle, mid-40s, gray suit, black briefcase. She moved with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Nina Lyons, appearing on behalf of the defendant. I apologize for my late arrival. Flight from D.C. was delayed. The judge frowned. D.C.? Yes, Your Honor. I am handling this case pro bono through a regional civil rights office. Marcus watched Garrett's face. The deputy's brow furrowed. D.C. That was not local. That was not expected. Very well, Ms. Lyons. Do you wish to respond to the bail request? I do, Your Honor. My client is 68 years old. She has lived in this county for 43 years. She retired after 38 years as an elementary school teacher. She has no criminal record, no history of violence. The charges against her are not merely exaggerated, they are fabricated. There is no federal task force operating in Morrow County. Deputy Garrett's claim of federal jurisdiction is unsupported by any documentation. Garrett shifted in his seat. Whitmore, sitting behind the prosecution table, leaned forward. "Your Honor," the ADA interjected, "the task force question is a matter for trial, not arraignment. The warrant was issued based on sworn testimony." "Sworn testimony that appears to be false," Lyons countered. "I intend to file a motion to dismiss based on perjury in the underlying affidavit." The judge raised a hand. "Enough. This is an arraignment, not a pre-trial hearing. Bail is set at $15,000. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for February 15th. We are adjourned." The gavel fell. Delores was led away to process bail. Marcus watched Garrett and Whitmore huddle together at the prosecution table. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but the body language was clear. Concern. Confusion. They had expected this to be easy. A frightened old woman with a public defender. Plead out. Move on. Instead, they got a DC attorney who knew exactly which questions to ask. Nina Lyons passed Marcus on her way out. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. No words, no acknowledgement, just the briefest nod between colleagues who could not afford to be seen as such. The game was changing, and Garrett did not even know the rules yet. Three weeks later, Marcus was walking back from the corner store when the patrol car appeared. 9:42 p.m. Maple Street. Dark except for the streetlights. The car slowed, stopped. The driver's door opened. Vance Garrett stepped out. Alone. "Holloway, little late to be walking around, is it not?" Marcus stopped. His hands stayed at his sides, visible. "Corner store closes at 10. I needed milk." "Milk." Garrett walked toward him. Slow, deliberate. "You know, I have been thinking about you. About your mother. About this whole situation. Is there something I can help you with, Deputy? You can help me understand something." Garrett stopped 2 feet away, close enough that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath. "Your mother gets arrested, federal charges, and somehow, within 12 hours, she has got a fancy lawyer from Washington, D.C. handling her case. She has good friends. Does she? Or do you?" Marcus did not respond. "See, I ran your name through the system. Marcus Holloway, Atlanta address. Works in administrative services for some company no one has heard of. No social media. No public records beyond the basics. Almost like you do not exist. I value my privacy. Most people who value their privacy are hiding something. Or they just value their privacy." Garrett stepped closer. His hand rested on his belt, inches from his weapon. "Let me tell you how this works, Mr. Holloway. Your mother's case goes to trial. My word against hers. Jury of her peers, sure, but her peers are going to look at a deputy with 12 years of service and an old woman who could not follow simple instructions. Who do you think they believe?" Marcus kept his voice level. "That sounds like intimidation of a witness, Deputy." "Witness to what? There is nobody here but you and me. No cameras, no recordings, just two men having a conversation." "Deputy, I am not entirely certain that is accurate." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I am going to walk home now. And you are going to let me. Because if anything happens to me on this street tonight, you are going to have more problems than you can imagine." For a moment, neither man moved. Then Garrett laughed. A harsh sound without humor. "You think you are smart. You think you have got this figured out. But let me tell you something, Mr. Holloway. I have been doing this job for 12 years. 12 years, and not once has anyone made anything stick. Not complaints, not lawsuits, nothing. You know why? Enlighten me. Because the system protects its own. And you? You are not part of the system. You are just some nobody from Atlanta who thinks he can play hero." Garrett backed toward his car. "Tell your mother I said hello. I will see her in court. The patrol car pulled away. Marcus stood motionless until it disappeared around the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and checked the signal. Full bars. Good. He typed a text. Clear audio capture. Visual confirmation pending. 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed with a reply. Confirmed. 4K video. Clean audio. Excellent work. Marcus pocketed the phone and walked home. Somewhere in the darkness, on a side street Marcus had specifically chosen for its sightlines, someone had been watching with a long-range camera. Garrett thought there were no witnesses. He was wrong. The weeks crawled by. Winter settled over Morrow County with cold rain and gray skies. Delores spent her days in the house, venturing out only when necessary, avoiding the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere. Marcus stayed. He could have gone back to Atlanta, maintained cover through remote communication, but he could not leave her alone. Not now. So he worked from her kitchen table, laptop open, files updating, the documentation growing thicker by the day. In early December, the leaked documents arrived, a plain envelope in Dolores's mailbox. No return address, no stamps, hand-delivered. Inside were 3 pages of printed emails and a handwritten note. I cannot watch them do this anymore. R.C. Marcus recognized the initials. Rhonda Crewe, local journalist. She had been trying to expose problems at the sheriff's office for years. No one had listened. No one had helped. Now she was helping him. The first email was between Sergeant Macklin and Captain Whitmore, dated 2 days after the Greenfield Market incident. Dorian, the body cam situation has been handled. It confirmed the file corruption report is ready if anyone asks. Regarding witness statements, I spoke with 2 individuals who were present. They have decided they do not remember the details clearly. Recommendation: let Garrett establish the narrative first. The countercharge will neutralize any complaint. Lila. The second email was from Captain Whitmore to Sheriff Sloan Avery. Sheriff, the situation is under control. Countercharge has been filed. The victim's son appears to be a civilian. Office worker. No legal background according to the background check we ran. Recommendation: standard playbook. Delay. Document. Dismiss. Dorian. Marcus read the emails 3 times. No legal background. Standard playbook. They had no idea who they were dealing with. But that line, the background check we ran, that was new information. They had investigated him, run his name through systems, and they had found exactly what the FBI had designed them to find. A boring office worker with no connections and no threat. The cover was holding. The 3rd page was different. An email chain between Sheriff Avery and a sender whose address had been redacted. Blacked out completely, even in the leaked version. The subject line read, Special Project, Sloan. The arrangement continues as discussed. Quarterly transfer confirmed. Ensure the unit remains discreet. Redacted. Quarterly transfer, Special Project, discreet. Marcus stared at the page. This was not about his mother. This was something else, something bigger. He photographed the documents, encrypted the files, and sent them to Washington. The reply came within an hour. Received. Cross-referencing with existing intelligence. The redacted sender is concerning. Suggests external coordination. Continue investigation. This may be larger than originally assessed. Larger than originally assessed. 14 months of work, and he was only scratching the surface. Marcus closed his laptop and looked out the window at the empty street. Somewhere in this county, there was a connection he had not found yet. A pattern he had not seen. A secret that someone had gone to great lengths to protect. And the harder they worked to bury it, the more certain he became that it needed to be found. Christmas came and went without celebration. New Year brought no resolution. In mid-January, 3 weeks before the preliminary hearing, Nina Lyons called Marcus with news. We received discovery from the prosecution, the body cam footage they are submitting as evidence. How much survived the corruption? 11 seconds. 11 seconds out of 4.5 minutes. Yes, and those 11 seconds have been edited. There is a splice at the 8-second mark, barely visible unless you know what to look for. They doctored the surviving footage? It appears so. I have retained a forensic analyst to examine the file. Her preliminary assessment is that the original recording was significantly longer, was truncated at the server level rather than the device level, and was subsequently modified to remove context from the remaining segment. Marcus absorbed this. They were not just hiding evidence, they were fabricating it. What about the server access logs? We subpoenaed them. The department objected on grounds of security concerns. The judge is considering the motion. And if he denies it? Then we go to federal court. This case was filed under federal jurisdiction. That gives us access to federal discovery rules, which are considerably more expansive than state procedures. They thought the federal charge would protect them. It is actually giving us more tools. Exactly right. Nina's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. They are not accustomed to defendants who fight back. They made this more complicated than they needed to, and now they are stuck with the consequences. Marcus thanked her and ended the call. Then he sat in the quiet of his mother's kitchen and thought about what came next. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks away. That was when Garrett would testify under oath about what happened at Greenfield Market. That was when the prosecution would commit their narrative to official record, and that was when Marcus would decide whether to maintain cover or reveal himself. 3 weeks, 14 months of preparation coming down to a single moment. He had always known this day would come. He had just never expected it to be about his mother. Cho. 2 weeks before the hearing, the final piece fell into place. Rhonda Crewe disappeared. Not dramatically, not with sirens or search parties. She simply stopped coming to work, stopped answering her phone, stopped existing in the spaces she had occupied for 30 years. The Morrow County Register announced that she had been let go due to restructuring. Her desk was cleared, her files were boxed, her byline vanished from the paper's archives. Marcus tried calling her. The number was disconnected. He drove to her apartment. The landlord said she had moved out 2 weeks ago. No forwarding address. Gone. Like she had never been there at all. On the morning of her disappearance, Marcus received one final message from her phone. They found out. Be careful, there is more than one snake. He saved the message, encrypted it, added it to the file. More than one snake. The sheriff, the sergeant, the captain, the deputy, the councilman. Those were the names he knew, the faces in the file. But Rhonda had found something else. Something that scared her enough to run. And whatever it was connected to that redacted email address. The quarterly transfer, the special project. Marcus was not investigating a corrupt sheriff's department anymore. He was investigating something bigger, something that had roots outside Morrow County, something that could protect itself by making people disappear. 3 more days until the preliminary hearing. He would get his answers then, or die trying. The night before the hearing, Marcus sat on the back porch with his mother. The air was cold. February in Georgia was not as harsh as February up north, but it had teeth. They both wore coats, both held cups of coffee that steamed in the darkness. "Tomorrow," Delores said. It was not a question. "Tomorrow. Are you going to tell me the truth, Marcus, before we walk into that courtroom?" He had avoided this conversation for months. Redirected, deflected, lied by omission. He could not avoid it any longer. "Mama, I work for the federal government." Delores nodded slowly, not surprised. Perhaps she had known longer than he realized. "FBI?" "Civil Rights Division." "And you have been investigating these people, Garrett, Macklin?" "For 14 months. She was quiet for a long moment. The coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands. "And what happened to me, at the grocery store?" "It was not supposed to happen. I received intelligence that Garrett was active in the area that afternoon. I should have changed your schedule, kept you inside, but I thought the cover was more important." "The cover?" "If I had acted differently, they might have noticed, might have suspected, 14 months of work, Mama. 43 documented incidents. 6 people ready to testify about what this department has done to them. If I had blown cover to protect you, all of that would have been lost. So you sat in your car. Her voice was flat. And you watched. Yes. You watched your mother get beaten, and you did nothing. I documented. I gathered evidence. I made sure that what happened to you would be part of the case that takes them down. That is not nothing? Marcus did not answer. He did not have an answer. Delores set down her coffee cup, stood, looked down at her son with an expression he had never seen before. I have spent 5 months being called a liar, being thrown out of the school I gave my life to, being arrested in my own home, being whispered about in grocery stores. 5 months, Marcus, and the whole time you knew. You knew who you were. You knew this was part of something bigger, and you let me suffer anyway. Mama, I understand duty. I understand sacrifice. 38 years in a classroom, I understand what it means to put something bigger than yourself first. She took a breath. But you are my son, and you let them hurt me so you could keep playing your game. It is not a game. No, it is worse than a game. Games have rules. Games have endings. What you do, Marcus. She shook her head. I do not know if I can forgive you for this. I do not know if I want to. She walked inside. The screen door banged shut behind her. Marcus sat alone in the cold. The coffee went cold in his hands. Tomorrow, he would walk into a courtroom and decide whether to reveal himself, whether to burn 14 months of work to save his mother's reputation, whether to choose family over mission or mission over family. But tonight, he had already lost something that no verdict could restore: the trust of the woman who had raised him, and he was not sure he would ever get it back. February 15th, 8:45 a.m., Morrow County Courthouse. The preliminary hearing for United States versus Delores Marie Holloway was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Marcus sat in his usual seat in the back row, notebook on his knee, pen in hand, looking for all the world like a devoted son supporting his elderly mother through an unjust prosecution. He was that, but he was also something else. In his pocket was his FBI badge. In his briefcase was 14 months of documentation, and in his mind was a decision that would change everything. The courtroom filled. Garrett at the prosecution table, uniform pressed, confidence radiating. Whitmore 2 rows behind. Macklin near the door, watching everyone who entered. Sheriff Sloan Avery was not present. He had avoided every hearing so far. Plausible deniability. Keep the top man clean while the subordinates did the dirty work. That would change soon. Delores was led in at 8:55. She looked tired. She looked older than she had 5 months ago, but she held her head high and took her seat next to Nina Lyons without wavering. She did not look at Marcus. He understood. The judge entered. The bailiff called the court to order. The hearing began. For the next 2 hours, Marcus watched the prosecution present their case. Garrett testified. Whitmore provided procedural backing. A parade of documentation designed to transform a victim into a criminal. Nina Lyons cross-examined with surgical precision. She exposed inconsistencies. She highlighted gaps. She laid the groundwork for the motion to dismiss that would come once she had enough on the record. And Marcus waited. At 11:30 a.m., the judge called a recess for lunch. 1 hour. In 1 hour, the hearing would resume. Nina would complete her cross-examination of Garrett. Then she would call her witnesses. And then Marcus would have to decide. He found his mother in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was sitting on a bench, Nina Lyons beside her, going over notes. "Mama, can we talk?" Delores looked up. Her eyes were guarded, but she nodded. They walked to a quiet corner near the stairwell, away from prying eyes and listening ears. "The hearing resumes in 45 minutes, Marcus said. Nina is going to finish with Garrett, And then she is going to call me as a witness. You? I was there, Mama. I saw what happened. My testimony corroborates yours. Your testimony is who? Marcus the son? Or Marcus the FBI agent? That was the question. If I testify as your son, I maintain cover. The investigation continues. We gather more evidence, build a stronger case, potentially take down the entire department. And if you testify as an FBI agent? I reveal the investigation. Garrett gets arrested for perjury and civil rights violations. The case against you collapses immediately. But the broader pattern or practice investigation loses momentum. The other victims may never get justice. Delores was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do, Marcus? I want to protect you. I want to make sure these people never hurt anyone again. I want both things to be true at the same time, but I am not sure they can be. No, they probably cannot. She reached out and took his hand, the first contact she had initiated in months. You have spent 14 months building this case. How many people have they hurt in that time? Documented incidents? 43. Suspected incidents? Over 100. And if you break cover now? Some of them get justice, but not all. And the system that let this happen stays mostly intact. And if you do not break cover? I stay in the shadows. The investigation continues. Maybe in a few more months, DOJ opens a full pattern or practice case. Real reform, real accountability, but you stay under indictment. The charges hang over you, and I cannot guarantee we win. Delores squeezed his hand. Marcus, I am 68 years old. I have lived a good life, taught a lot of children, loved one man for 40 years, raised a son who believes in justice so much he was willing to sacrifice his own mother for it. Mama, I did not... Hush, let me finish. Her eyes met his. I am not going to tell you what to do. This is your mission, your work, your sacrifice. But I will tell you this. Whatever you decide, decide it because it is right. Not because of me, not because of guilt, because it is the right thing to do. What if I do not know what the right thing is? Then you are finally starting to understand what being a grown-up feels like. She released his hand and walked back toward the courtroom. Marcus stood alone in the stairwell. 30 minutes until the hearing resumed. 30 minutes to decide the course of everything. He had entered this building expecting to remain in the shadows for 3 more months. To let the system play out, to sacrifice his mother's reputation for the greater good. But something Rhonda Crewe had written kept echoing in his mind. There is more than one snake, not just Garrett, not just Macklin and Whitmore and Avery. Something else. Someone else. Connections he had not found, patterns he had not seen. If he revealed himself now, he closed one door but opened another. He became a target. He lost the element of surprise. But he also gained something else. He became a witness, an active participant, a threat they could not ignore. And threatened people made mistakes. Tja. The hearing resumed at 12:30 p.m. Nina Lyons completed her cross-examination of Deputy Garrett. His story held on the surface, but the cracks were visible. The non-existent task force, the timeline inconsistencies, the body cam footage that began mid-incident with no explanation. At 1:15 p.m., Nina rose. Your Honor, the defense calls Marcus Holloway. Murmurs in the courtroom. Garrett's head turned sharply. Whitmore leaned forward. Even Macklin by the door went still. Marcus walked to the witness stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. And then, for the next 30 minutes, he testified. He described what he saw at Greenfield Market, the arrival of the patrol car, the approach without introduction, the demand without probable cause, the slap, the fall, the blood. He described it as a son, as a witness, as a civilian with no legal background who just happened to be in the parking lot. He maintained cover, exactly as he had been trained. But he also did something else. When Nina asked him about the aftermath, about the days following the incident, Marcus described something he had not shared with anyone. I received anonymous communication approximately 3 weeks after the incident, documents suggesting coordination between members of the sheriff's office to suppress evidence and discredit my mother. The ADA objected. Your Honor, this is hearsay and potentially fabricated. Your Honor, Nina countered, these documents have been submitted to federal authorities for verification. The witness is not testifying to their truth, but to their existence and his receipt of them. The judge considered. I will allow limited testimony. Continue. Marcus continued. The documents referenced a special project and quarterly transfers. They suggested that the individuals involved in my mother's case were connected to something larger than a single incident of excessive force. Garrett's face had gone pale. Whitmore was typing furiously on his phone. And in the back of the courtroom, a man Marcus had never seen before stood up and walked out. Tall, gray suit, silver hair. He moved like someone who did not want to be noticed. But Marcus noticed, and he memorized the face. The hearing concluded at 3:45 p.m. The judge took the motions under advisement. No immediate ruling on dismissal. But the doubt had been planted. The narrative had been challenged. And somewhere, in the halls of power Marcus did not yet fully understand, alarm bells were ringing. Outside the courthouse, Marcus found Nina Lyons waiting by her rental car. That was a risk, she said, mentioning the documents, hinting at a larger conspiracy. I know. Whoever is behind this, they know you are looking now. I know that too. And you did it anyway. Marcus looked back at the courthouse, at the building where his mother had just been forced to relive the worst day of her life. Someone once told me that threatened people make mistakes. I am hoping she was right. Nina studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. I will see you at the next hearing. Until then, be careful. Always. She drove away. Marcus stood in the parking lot, the February wind cutting through his jacket. His phone buzzed. A message from the Washington number. We intercepted communication following your testimony. High-level concern. Something is moving. Marcus typed back. Good. Let it move. A pause. Then, you have officially made yourself a target, Agent Holloway. I know. Another pause. Was it worth it? Marcus thought about his mother, about Rhonda Crewe, about the 43 documented incidents and the 100 suspected ones, about the man in the gray suit who had walked out of the courtroom. Ask me in 3 months. He pocketed the phone and walked to his car. Behind him, in the courthouse, Vance Garrett was making a phone call. And somewhere far away, a file was being opened with Marcus Holloway's name at the top. The game had changed. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and Marcus was exactly where he wanted to be, in the crosshairs. The man in the gray suit had a name. It took Marcus 11 days to find it. 11 days of cross-referencing courthouse security footage with vehicle registration databases. 11 days of tracing a rental car from the Morrow County courthouse parking lot to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta. 11 days of following a digital trail that someone had worked very hard to obscure. The name was Preston Hale, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Department of Justice, Civil Division. Not criminal, not civil rights. Civil Division. The branch that handled lawsuits against the federal government. The branch that defended agencies when they were accused of wrongdoing. The branch that protected institutions from accountability. Marcus stared at the photograph on his laptop screen. Silver hair, square jaw, the kind of face that looked trustworthy in a press conference, the kind of face that had learned to lie without blinking. Preston Hale had no official connection to Morrow County, no reason to attend a preliminary hearing for a misdemeanor assault case in rural Georgia, no business being 200 miles from his office in Washington on a Tuesday afternoon. And yet, there he was, in the back row, watching Marcus. The realization settled into Marcus's chest like ice water. He had spent 14 months believing he was the hunter, documenting, observing, building a case against a corrupt sheriff's department in a small Georgia county. But someone had been watching him the entire time. Someone in the Department of Justice itself. The snake was not just in Morrow County, the snake was in Washington. 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing, the forensic analysis of the body cam footage arrived. Nina Lyons met Marcus at a coffee shop in Decatur, 30 miles from Morrow County. Neutral territory, fewer eyes. She slid a manila folder across the table. Dr. Selena Marsh, 20 years with the FBI crime lab before she went private. Her report is bulletproof. Marcus opened the folder. The technical language was dense, but the conclusions were clear. The original footage file had been 4 minutes and 22 seconds long. It had been truncated to 11 seconds at the server level, not the device level. The truncation had occurred at 11:47 p.m. on the night of the incident, 6 hours after Delores was assaulted. But that was not the most damning finding. The remaining 11 seconds had been spliced. Frame analysis showed a discontinuity at the 8-second mark. Someone had removed approximately 3 seconds of footage from the middle of the surviving segment. 3 seconds that would have shown the moment of impact. The slap itself. They did not just delete evidence, Marcus said. They edited what remained to remove the most incriminating moment. That is not all. Nina pointed to a section near the end of the report. Dr. Marsh traced the server access. The modification was made from an internal IP address registered to the Sheriff's Office network. The user credentials belonged to Sergeant Lila Macklin. Macklin, the woman who ran the neighborhood watch like a surveillance operation. The woman who had appeared at the hospital within hours of the assault, already spinning the narrative. Can we use this in court? We filed a motion to compel the original server logs. The department objected on security grounds. The judge is considering. And if he rules against us? Then we go to federal court. The federal charge gives us access to federal discovery rules. Nina paused. But there is something else you need to see. She reached into her briefcase and produced a second folder. This one was thinner. A single page inside. This arrived at my office yesterday. No return address. Hand delivered. Marcus recognized the handwriting on the envelope before he even opened it. R.C. Rhonda Crewe, the journalist who had disappeared 3 weeks ago. Inside was a single document. A server access log from the Morrow County Sheriff's Office, IT Department. Entry number 7741. Date, the night of Delores' assault. Time, 11:47 p.m. User, SGT Macklin. Action, file modify. File name, BC Unit 14, followed by the date and timestamp. Notes, file size reduced from 127 megabytes to 3.2 megabytes. The smoking gun. Macklin had personally deleted over 120 megabytes of body cam footage, and someone inside the department had documented it. Where did Rhonda get this? I do not know, but whoever gave it to her is still inside, still watching. Marcus studied the document. The log entry was damning enough on its own. But something else caught his attention. The entry number, 7741, the same number as the 911 call that had started everything. Call ID 7741A. The anonymous report of a suspicious black woman at Greenfield Market. Coincidence, or a message. Someone inside the sheriff's office was leaving breadcrumbs. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Part 2 is about to change everything you thought you knew. April arrived with Georgia's first real heat of the year. The motion to compel server logs was denied by the state court judge. As expected, the Old Boys Network protecting its own. Nina immediately filed in federal court. The case was assigned to Judge Patricia Thornwood in the Northern District of Georgia, a Carter appointee, 81 years old, known for exactly 2 things: meticulous adherence to procedure and zero tolerance for government overreach. The hearing was scheduled for May 3rd. In the meantime, Marcus continued his documentation. He had expanded his investigation beyond the original scope. The redacted email about special projects and quarterly transfers had opened a door he could not close. Whatever was happening in Morrow County was connected to something larger, something that reached into Washington itself. Preston Hale's presence at the preliminary hearing proved that. Marcus began building a second file, parallel to the pattern or practice documentation. This one focused on financial records, campaign contributions, property transfers, the flow of money through Morrow County government. What he found made the excessive force complaints look like parking tickets. Over the past 5 years, the Morrow County Sheriff's Office had received federal grant funding totaling $4.7 million. Drug interdiction programs, community policing initiatives, equipment upgrades. On paper, the money had been spent as designated, but the equipment invoices did not match the equipment in service. The community policing initiatives had no documented outcomes, and the drug interdiction program had resulted in exactly 0 federal prosecutions, despite claiming over 300 seizures. Where had the money gone? Marcus traced one grant in particular, a 2021 disbursement of $800,000 for rural enforcement technology upgrades. The grant had been approved by the Department of Justice Civil Division. The signature on the approval document belonged to Preston Hale. The connection was there. Buried under layers of bureaucracy and plausible deniability, but there. Hale was not just observing the Morrow County investigation. He was protecting something, an investment, a relationship, a special project. May 3rd. Federal Courthouse in Atlanta. Marcus sat in the gallery, watching Nina Lyons argue before Judge Thornwood. The government's position was simple. The server logs contained sensitive law enforcement information that could compromise ongoing investigations if disclosed. National security, officer safety, the usual shields. Nina's counter was equally straightforward. The defendant had a constitutional right to evidence that could prove her innocence. The logs were not classified. They were administrative records subject to standard discovery rules, and the government's own forensic expert had confirmed that evidence had been tampered with. Judge Thornwood listened without expression. Her eyes moved between the attorneys like a hawk tracking prey. When the arguments concluded, she did not retire to consider. She ruled from the bench. The motion to compel is granted. The Morrow County Sheriff's Office will produce complete server access logs for the period in question within 14 days. Any further obstruction will be treated as contempt. The government attorney began to object. Thornwood cut him off. Mr. Reeves, I have been on this bench for 43 years. I have seen every trick in the book used to hide evidence from defendants who deserve to see it. I am too old and too tired to pretend I do not know what is happening here. Produce the logs. 14 days. She banged her gavel and left the courtroom. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The door was open. Now they just had to walk through it. The logs arrived on May 16th, one day before the deadline. Nina called Marcus immediately. We have a problem. He drove to her temporary office in downtown Atlanta, a rented space she had been using for the duration of the case. She was standing at a conference table covered with printed documents when he arrived. They gave us the logs, all of them, but look at this. She pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. The entries from the night of November 12th were there. The modification of the body cam file, the reduction from 127 megabytes to 3.2 megabytes. All documented. But the user field was different. Instead of SGT Macklin, it read System Admin. They changed it. They scrubbed the original and replaced it with a version that attributes the modification to a generic system account. No individual responsibility. No chain of custody to any specific person. Marcus picked up the document Rhonda Crewe had leaked, the original log. Entry 7741. User, SGT Macklin. We have the real version. We have an unsigned document delivered anonymously. They have official records produced under court order. Which do you think a jury believes? She was right. In a courtroom, authenticated government records beat anonymous leaks every time, even when the leaks were true. There has to be a way to prove the current logs were altered. There is, but it requires access to the physical server, the actual hardware where the logs are stored. Metadata analysis can show when files were modified at the system level, regardless of what the content says. And the only people with access to that server are inside the sheriff's office. Or the federal government. Marcus went still. Federal government. DOJ. Civil Division. Preston Hale. Nina, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you weeks ago. He explained what he had found. The man in the gray suit at the preliminary hearing. The identification through airport rental car records. The connection to the federal grant approvals. The $4.7 million that had flowed into Morrow County over 5 years. Nina listened without interrupting. When he finished, her face was pale. You are telling me this goes all the way to a Deputy Assistant Attorney General. I am telling you that Preston Hale approved grants worth nearly $5 million to a sheriff's department now under investigation for civil rights violations. I am telling you he attended a preliminary hearing in rural Georgia that had no connection to his official duties. And I am telling you that someone with access to federal systems could easily coordinate with local officials to alter evidence. That is not corruption. That is conspiracy. Yes. Nina sat down heavily. Marcus, I took this case because I believed in your mother's innocence, because I wanted to help someone who had been wronged by a broken system. I did not sign up to take on the Department of Justice. I know. This changes everything. The scope, the resources we need, the danger. I know that too. She looked at him for a long moment. Who are you really, Marcus? And do not give me the paperwork and files line. Not anymore. Marcus had rehearsed this moment 100 times. The reveal, the confession, the moment when he would have to choose between cover and truth. He had always imagined it happening in a courtroom. Dramatic, public, decisive. Instead, it happened in a rented office in downtown Atlanta, with afternoon sun streaming through dirty windows and the sound of traffic below. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. I have been conducting an undercover investigation into the Morrow County Sheriff's Office for 14 months. Nina did not move, did not blink. Your mother was not part of the plan. She was supposed to be safe. I made a mistake. A mistake that got her assaulted and arrested. Yes. And you sat in that parking lot and watched. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Marcus could see the calculations happening behind Nina's eyes. The reassessment, the recalibration. Does the Bureau know about Hale? I reported my findings last week. No response yet. No response. That is not good. No, it is not. Nina stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Atlanta skyline. If Hale is dirty, and if he has connections inside the Bureau, then your investigation is compromised. Has been from the beginning, possibly. I have considered that. And you are still here, still pushing. I do not know how to stop. She turned back to face him. What do you want to do? I want to go public, not with the undercover operation. With the evidence. All of it. The body cam tampering, the fraudulent federal charges, the grant money, the connection to Hale. I want to put it in front of a federal judge and let the system decide what to do with it. And if the system is the problem, then at least we will know. At least it will be on the record. Nina was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. The preliminary hearing for your mother's case is scheduled for June 15th, 6 weeks from now. That is when the prosecution has to show they have enough evidence to go to trial. And if we can prove the evidence was fabricated, the case gets dismissed. But more importantly, we create an official record of government misconduct, a record that cannot be scrubbed or altered, a foundation for everything that comes after. Then that is our target, June 15th. June 15th. They shook hands, not as attorney and client's son, as partners in something much larger than either of them had anticipated. The next 5 weeks were a blur of preparation. Marcus worked 18-hour days, building timelines, cross-referencing documents, preparing witness lists that would never be shared with the defense until the moment they were needed. He also did something he had never done before. He went off-book. The FBI chain of command required him to report all findings through official channels, to wait for authorization before taking action, to trust the system. But the system had Preston Hale in it. The system had been watching him for 14 months without his knowledge. The system might be the very thing he was trying to expose. So Marcus built a parallel case, one that existed only on encrypted drives and in the memory of people he trusted. Nina Lyons, 2 former FBI colleagues who had left the Bureau under circumstances that suggested they understood what it meant to fight the institution from inside. A journalist in Washington who had been investigating DOJ corruption for years. They called themselves Nothing, had no name, no formal structure, just a shared understanding that something was very wrong and someone had to do something about it. The risk was enormous. If Marcus was caught conducting an unauthorized investigation, his career was over. Worse than over. He could face prosecution himself. But he thought about his mother, about Delores, who had been dragged through hell because she asked a police officer to explain himself, about the 43 other incidents in his file, about the 100 more he suspected, about Rhonda Crewe, who had disappeared trying to expose the truth. Some risks were worth taking. This story has more twists coming than you can imagine. Drop a comment below with your theory about Preston Hale, and do not forget to share this with someone who loves a good legal thriller. June 10th, 5 days before the hearing. Marcus received an unexpected visitor. He was at his mother's house reviewing documents at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. Delores was in the back room resting. She had been sleeping poorly since the arrest. Nightmares, anxiety, the toll of 6 months of persecution. Marcus opened the door. The man standing on the porch was tall, black, early 60s, gray temples, a bearing that suggested military or law enforcement. "Agent Holloway, I apologize for the unannounced visit. My name is Raymond Cross. I am an Assistant Inspector General with the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General." Marcus did not move from the doorway. "How did you find me?" "I have been tracking your investigation for approximately 3 months, since you first requested financial records on the federal grants to Morrow County. You have been surveilling me." "Monitoring. There is a difference." Cross produced credentials. "May I come in? What I have to say is better discussed privately." Marcus studied the credentials. They looked genuine. But so had everything else about this operation. "How do I know you are not working for Hale?" Cross smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "You do not, but I can tell you this. Preston Hale has been on my radar for 7 years. 7 years of suspicious grant approvals, unexplained trips, connections to law enforcement agencies with pattern or practice problems. I have never been able to make anything stick, until now." "What changed?" "You did, Agent Holloway. Your documentation of Morrow County is the most comprehensive evidence of coordinated civil rights violations I have ever seen, and your discovery of Hale's connection to the federal funding gives me something I have never had before, a thread I can pull." Marcus stepped aside. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table. Marcus closed his laptop but did not put it away. "Tell me what you know," he said. Cross laid out a story that was both familiar and horrifying. Preston Hale had been with the Department of Justice for 31 years. He had risen through the ranks during an era when oversight was minimal and institutional loyalty was paramount. Along the way, he had built a network, colleagues who owed him favors, agencies that depended on his grant approvals, a web of mutual protection that spanned dozens of jurisdictions. The grants were the key, federal money flowing to local law enforcement with minimal accountability. On paper, the programs were legitimate: drug interdiction, community policing, technology upgrades. But the implementation was never audited. The outcomes were never verified, and the money often ended up in places it was never supposed to go. "We believe Hale has been running this scheme for at least 15 years, Cross said. Total misappropriated funds, somewhere between $20 and $40 million. Where does it go? We are still piecing that together. Some appears to fund off-books operations, surveillance programs that would never survive congressional scrutiny, intelligence gathering on domestic targets without proper authorization. Like journalists investigating police corruption." Cross nodded slowly. "Rhonda Crewe is not the first person to disappear after getting too close to Hale's network. She is just the most recent." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Is she alive?" "We do not know. We have been unable to locate her since she stopped coming to work. Her apartment was cleaned out. Her bank accounts were closed. It is as if she never existed." "And Hale did this?" "Hale or someone in his network. The pattern is consistent with previous disappearances we have tracked." Marcus absorbed this. 14 months of investigation, 43 documented incidents of civil rights violations, and underneath it all, a federal corruption scheme that had been operating for over a decade. He was not investigating a county sheriff's office. He was investigating a criminal enterprise that reached into the heart of the Justice Department. "Why are you telling me this?" Cross leaned forward. "Because I need your help, Agent Holloway. The Inspector General's office has limited enforcement authority. We can investigate. We can document. We can refer findings for prosecution. But we cannot make arrests. We cannot file charges. We need partners inside the Bureau who are willing to act. The Bureau may be compromised. Parts of it, but not all of it. There are good people in the FBI who want to do the right thing. They just need evidence. They need someone willing to put their name on it. You want me to go public? I want you to testify at your mother's hearing next week, not as a civilian witness, as an FBI agent conducting an authorized investigation. I want you to put everything you have found on the record in open court, where it cannot be hidden or destroyed. If I do that, I lose the ability to continue undercover work." "Yes." "Hale's network will know I am coming for them." "They already know, Agent Holloway. They have known since you started pulling financial records. The question is whether you strike first or wait for them to strike." Marcus thought about his mother, sleeping in the back room, broken by a system that was supposed to protect her. He thought about Rhonda Crewe, disappeared, possibly dead, because she tried to tell the truth. He thought about the 43 victims in his file, the 100 more he suspected, the thousands across the country who had been abused by people Preston Hale's network had protected. "June 15th, he said. "I will testify on June 15th. Cross extended his hand. "Welcome to the fight, Agent Holloway." Marcus shook it. "I have been in this fight for 14 months. I just did not know who the enemy was." The night before the hearing, Marcus told his mother everything. They sat on the back porch, the same place they had sat 6 months earlier when everything changed, the same stars overhead, the same sounds of a Georgia summer night. But everything else was different. Delores listened without interruption as Marcus explained. The FBI, the investigation, the decision he had made in the parking lot, the 14 months of lies. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You should have told me." "I know. I spent 6 months thinking my son had abandoned me, that he sat in his car and watched me bleed because he did not care enough to help. I know, Mama. I questioned everything about how I raised you, whether I failed you somehow, whether the man I thought I knew had ever really existed. Mama, let me finish." Her voice was firm. the voice of a teacher who had controlled classrooms for 40 years. I understand duty. I understand sacrifice. I even understand why you made the choice you made in that parking lot. But you should have told me afterward. You should have trusted me enough to share the burden. I was trying to protect you. From what? From the truth? Marcus, I am 68 years old. I have buried a husband. I have survived in a country that has never quite decided whether I belong here. I am not fragile. I am not something that needs to be protected from hard truths. I know that now. Do you? She turned to face him. Because tomorrow you are going to walk into that courtroom and reveal yourself to the world. You are going to make enemies of people who have shown they are willing to make inconvenient people disappear. And I need to know that you understand what you are risking. I understand. Your career, your safety, maybe your life. I understand, Mama. And you are doing it anyway. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then I am proud of you, and I am terrified for you. And I love you more than I know how to say. Marcus felt something release in his chest, something he had been carrying since November 12th. I love you too, Mama. Good, she stood up. Now get some sleep. You have a long day tomorrow. She went inside. Marcus stayed on the porch, watching the stars. Tomorrow, everything would change. The masks would come off. The truth would be spoken aloud in a place where it could not be unsaid. And whatever came after, at least he would face it honestly. June 15th. 8:45 a.m., Morrow County Courthouse. The courtroom was more crowded than it had been at any previous hearing. Word had spread, not about what was going to happen, but about the case itself. A retired schoolteacher charged with assaulting a federal officer, an accusation that did not match anything anyone knew about Delores Holloway. A story that had captured local attention and was beginning to attract national notice. 3 reporters sat in the gallery, 2 from Atlanta newspapers, 1 from a national outlet that had run a story the previous week about patterns of false arrest in rural southern counties. Deputy Vance Garrett sat at the prosecution table, uniform pressed, face confident. He had won every confrontation so far, every complaint dismissed, every accusation deflected. He had no reason to believe today would be different. Sergeant Lila Macklin sat in the first row behind the prosecution, Captain Dorian Whitmore beside her. They were presenting a united front, standing by their officer. Sheriff Sloan Avery was absent, as always. But in the back row, barely visible, sat a man in a gray suit with silver hair, Preston Hale. Marcus saw him the moment he entered the courtroom. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second. Hale's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted, a recognition, a warning. Marcus took his seat in the gallery and waited. Mchag. The hearing began at 9 a.m. Judge Harold Patterson presiding, 64 years old, Morrow County born and raised, not known for ruling against local law enforcement. The prosecution presented its case first. Assistant District Attorney Mitchell Hayes walked through the evidence. The 911 call reporting a suspicious person, Deputy Garrett's response, the alleged assault, the arrest. Garrett testified with practiced ease. His story had not changed in 7 months. Every detail consistent, every word rehearsed. And what happened when you attempted to verify the defendant's identity? She became aggressive. She swung at me with her right hand. I deflected the blow and used minimal force to restrain her. What kind of force? An open palm push to create distance. Standard defensive technique. An open palm push. Not a slap, not a strike. A push. The lie was smooth, confident. The lie of a man who had never been caught. Nina Lyons began her cross-examination at 10:30 a.m. Deputy Garrett, you testified that you were performing duties in support of an FBI joint task force at the time of this incident. Can you tell the court which task force? Garrett hesitated for the first time. The Southeast Regional Narcotics Initiative. And what was your specific role in that initiative? General patrol support, intelligence gathering. I see. Deputy Garrett, are you aware that the Southeast Regional Narcotics Initiative was dissolved in 2021, 2 years before this incident? Garrett's face went blank. That is not my understanding. Your understanding. Nina produced a document. Defense Exhibit A. A memorandum from the FBI Atlanta Field Office dated March 2021, confirming the dissolution of the Southeast Regional Narcotics Initiative due to budget reallocation. Would you like to review it? ADA Hayes stood. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, the federal charge against my client requires proof that Deputy Garrett was engaged in federal duties at the time of the incident. If no such federal program existed, the charge is fraudulent. Judge Patterson considered. I will allow it. Continue. Garrett looked at the document. His confidence was cracking. There may be other task forces, other programs. I would need to consult with my commanding officer. Your commanding officer? Nina turned to the gallery. Is Captain Dorian Whitmore present in the courtroom? Whitmore stood reluctantly. I am here. Captain Whitmore, are you aware of any active federal task force that Deputy Garrett was supporting on November 12th of last year? Whitmore's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That information would be operationally sensitive. Captain, this is a court of law. You are under oath. Judge Patterson leaned forward. Answer the question, Captain. Whitmore looked at Garrett, at Macklin, at the door. I am not aware of any specific task force assignment for Deputy Garrett on that date. The courtroom stirred. The reporters leaned forward, pens moving. Nina pressed on. So, when Deputy Garrett filed an affidavit claiming federal jurisdiction based on task force duties, he was... Objection. Hayes was on his feet. Counsel is asking the witness to speculate about another witness's testimony. I withdraw the question. Nina turned back to Garrett. Deputy, let me ask you directly. Did you have any documentation of a federal task force assignment on November 12th? Garrett's jaw tightened. I do not have that documentation with me. Did you ever have such documentation? Deputy Garrett, did you commit perjury when you swore under oath that you were performing federal duties at the time of this incident? Objection. Sustained. Judge Patterson's voice was sharp. Ms. Lyons, you are testing my patience. Apologies, Your Honor. No further questions for this witness. Garrett stepped down. His face was red. His hands were shaking. The first crack had appeared. The morning session ended at noon. Judge Patterson called a 2-hour recess for lunch. Marcus did not eat. He spent the time in Nina's temporary office, reviewing the materials for the afternoon session. This was it. The moment he had been building toward for 14 months. At 2 p.m. he would take the stand. He would reveal his identity. He would present evidence that would change everything, and he had no idea what would happen after that. His phone buzzed. A text from Raymond Cross. Hale made 3 calls during the recess. DC numbers. Something is moving on their end. Be careful. Marcus pocketed the phone. Careful was no longer an option. The afternoon session began at 2:15 p.m. Nina Lyons stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Marcus Holloway. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Everyone knew Marcus as the defendant's son, the quiet man who sat in the back row at every hearing, the one who never spoke. Marcus walked to the witness stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Nina began with the basics. His name, his relationship to the defendant, his presence at Greenfield Market on November 12th. Then she shifted. Mr. Holloway, what is your occupation? Marcus looked at the courtroom, at Garrett, whose confidence had curdled into confusion, at Macklin and Whitmore, whose faces had gone pale, at Preston Hale in the back row, whose expression had not changed, but whose eyes had gone cold. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division, badge number 4471. Silence. Absolute, complete silence. Then chaos. Garrett shot to his feet. This is entrapment. This is a setup. Macklin was already moving toward the door. A bailiff stepped into her path. Whitmore had his phone out, typing frantically, and in the back row, Preston Hale rose from his seat and walked out. Judge Patterson banged his gavel. Order! Order in this courtroom! The noise subsided. Marcus remained in the witness chair, calm, waiting. Agent Holloway. Patterson's voice was ice. Please explain your presence in this case. Your Honor, for the past 15 months, I have been conducting an authorized investigation into patterns of civil rights violations by the Morrow County Sheriff's Office. During that time, I documented 43 incidents of excessive force, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. He reached into his jacket and produced a leather case. Inside was his badge. He held it up for the court to see. Defense Exhibit B FBI credentials for Special Agent Marcus Holloway, Civil Rights Division. Nina approached with a stack of documents. Defense Exhibit C, Your Honor. Authorization letter from the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, dated 15 months ago, authorizing a pattern or practice investigation into Morrow County Sheriff's Office under 34 U.S.C. Section 12601. Patterson read the letter. His face was unreadable. Continue, Agent Holloway. Marcus continued. He described what he had witnessed at Greenfield Market. Not as a son, but as a trained federal agent who had observed an assault in progress. He described the aftermath, the coordinated narrative on social media, the retaliation against his mother's volunteer position, the fabricated federal charges designed to transform a victim into a criminal. He presented the evidence. The body cam footage analysis showing deliberate tampering, the server logs showing Sergeant Macklin's access, the leaked emails documenting coordination between department officials. And then he went further. Your Honor, during my investigation, I discovered connections between this department and federal officials that suggest a broader pattern of corruption. A.D. Hayes objected. This is far beyond the scope of the current case. Your Honor, the defense argues that the charges against Delores Holloway are part of a systematic effort to silence witnesses and obstruct federal investigations. The evidence of broader corruption is directly relevant. Patterson considered. I will allow it. Briefly. Marcus described the federal grants, the $4.7 million that had flowed into Morrow County over 5 years, the equipment that was never purchased, the programs that produced no results. He did not name Preston Hale directly. That would come later, through other channels. But he laid the foundation. The evidence suggests that this department has been receiving federal funds under false pretenses, and that at least some of those funds have been used for purposes unrelated to their stated intent. A full accounting will require further investigation by appropriate authorities. Patterson's gaze moved to the prosecution table, to A.D.A. Hayes, who looked like a man watching his career implode. Mr. Hayes, does the prosecution wish to respond? Hayes stood slowly. Your Honor, the prosecution requests a recess to evaluate this new information. Denied. Agent Holloway, is there anything else? One more thing, Your Honor. Marcus looked at his mother, at the woman who had raised him, who had suffered for 6 months because of choices he had made. The defendant, Delores Holloway, is my mother. On November 12th of last year, I watched Deputy Vance Garrett assault her without provocation. I watched him strike her across the face. I watched her fall. I watched her bleed. And I did not intervene because my duty required me to maintain cover. His voice did not waver. But something in his eyes broke. I cannot change what happened that day. I cannot give my mother back the 6 months she has lost to this prosecution. But I can ensure that the truth is told, that the people who did this to her are held accountable, that no one else has to endure what she has endured. He turned back to Patterson. Your Honor, the charges against Delores Holloway are fraudulent. They were filed to discredit a victim and obstruct a federal investigation. I respectfully request that they be dismissed." Patterson was silent for a long moment. The courtroom held its breath. "The court will take a 30-minute recess to consider the testimony presented." The gavel fell. Before we reach the conclusion, make sure you have subscribed to the channel. The ending of this story is something you do not want to miss. 30 minutes became an hour. The hour stretched toward 2. Marcus sat in the hallway with his mother. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. At 4:47 p.m., exactly 6 months to the minute from when Delores had been standing in that parking lot waiting for her son, the bailiff called them back into the courtroom. Judge Patterson sat at the bench. His face was gray. In the matter of United States versus Delores Marie Holloway, this court finds as follows. He looked at the prosecution table. At the empty seat where Deputy Garrett had sat before being escorted out by federal marshals who had arrived during the recess. The evidence presented today demonstrates that the charges against the defendant were filed under false pretenses. The claim of federal jurisdiction was based on a task force that did not exist. The body cam footage was deliberately tampered with to remove exculpatory evidence, and the investigation itself was compromised by conflicts of interest at multiple levels of government. He turned to Delores. "Mrs. Holloway, this court owes you an apology. The system that was supposed to protect you failed. It failed spectacularly. It failed in ways that should shake every citizen's faith in the institutions we are supposed to trust." He straightened the papers in front of him. "The charges against Delores Holloway are dismissed with prejudice. The defendant is free to go." Delores let out a breath she had been holding for 6 months. "Furthermore," Patterson continued, "this court is referring the evidence presented today to the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia. The matters raised by Agent Holloway's testimony warrant immediate federal investigation." He looked at Marcus. "Agent Holloway, I have been a judge in this county for 23 years. I thought I knew how things worked. I thought I understood the system I was part of. Today, you showed me I was wrong. That is not easy to accept, but it is necessary." He stood. "Court is adjourned." Ciao. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, Deputy Vance Garrett was arrested on federal charges of civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, perjury, and obstruction of justice. He was held without bail pending trial. Sergeant Lila Macklin was placed on administrative leave pending investigation for evidence tampering. She hired a lawyer from Atlanta and stopped speaking to anyone from the department. Captain Dorian Whitmore resigned his position and applied for a job in another state. His application was denied when his new employer received an anonymous tip about his involvement in the cover-up. Sheriff Sloan Avery announced that he would not seek re-election. He would serve out the remaining 14 months of his term, then retire with full pension. No charges were filed against him. There was insufficient evidence of direct involvement. The pattern held. The foot soldiers fell. The generals walked away. So, 2 weeks after the hearing, the Department of Justice announced a formal pattern or practice investigation into the Morrow County Sheriff's Office. The investigation would be led by the Civil Rights Division. It would examine all uses of force over the past 10 years, all complaints, all internal affairs investigations. The consent decree negotiations began in August. By October, a preliminary agreement was reached. New body-worn camera requirements, mandatory de-escalation training, independent oversight of complaint investigations, community review boards with real authority. Progress. Real progress. But incomplete. The cameras would help, as would. The training might change some behaviors. The oversight would catch some violations. But the culture that had allowed this to happen, the network that had protected it, the connections that reached into Washington itself, those remained intact. Preston Hale resigned from the Department of Justice on September 1st. The official statement cited personal reasons and praised his 31 years of distinguished service. There was no mention of investigations, no suggestion of wrongdoing. He moved to a consulting firm in Virginia. Private sector, 6-figure salary, a comfortable retirement for a man who had spent 3 decades building a network of corruption. The Inspector General's investigation continued. Raymond Cross worked the case for another 18 months. He documented the grant fraud, the misappropriated funds, the disappearances of people who had gotten too close. In the end, no charges were filed. The evidence was strong but circumstantial. The witnesses were scattered or silent. The system that was supposed to hold Hale accountable was the same system he had spent 3 decades building relationships within. The snake survived. Rhonda Crewe was never found. Her family filed a missing persons report that went nowhere. Her apartment remained empty. Her car was discovered in a long-term parking lot at the Nashville airport, 300 miles from where she had lived. Marcus thought about her often, about the documents she had leaked, about the courage it had taken to stand against people who had shown they were willing to make problems disappear, about the final message she had sent. There is more than one snake. She had been right, and she had paid the price for being right. 1 year after the parking lot. Marcus and Delores sat on the back porch of the house on Maple Street. The sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. The fence had been repainted again. 3rd time. The shutters had been fixed. The house looked better than it had in years. But something had changed, something that could not be fixed with paint and repairs. Delores reached over and took her son's hand. "Do you remember what you said to me that night, before the hearing?" "Which part?" "The part about not knowing how to stop." Marcus nodded slowly. "I remember." "Have you stopped now? Is it over?" He thought about the question, about the investigation that had consumed 15 months of his life, about the case files still sitting on his laptop, about the names that had never been crossed off his list. Garrett was awaiting trial. Macklin was under investigation. Whitmore had fled. Avery was counting down the days until retirement. But Preston Hale was consulting in Virginia. The quarterly transfers mentioned in that redacted email had never been explained. The special project remained a mystery. And somewhere, Rhonda Crewe was missing, possibly dead, because she had tried to tell the truth. "No, Mama, it is not over." "Will it ever be?" "I do not know." Delores squeezed his hand. "Then promise me something." "Anything." "Promise me you will not disappear. Not like she did, not like the others. Promise me that whatever you do, wherever this takes you, you will come home." Marcus looked at his mother, at the woman who had raised him, who had been broken by a system he had spent his life trying to fix, who had forgiven him even when she had every reason not to. "I promise." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good. Because I am too old to bury another person I love." They sat together as the sun went down, as the stars came out, as another day ended in a county that would never be quite the same. And somewhere in Virginia, Preston Hale looked at his phone, at a message from a number he did not recognize. "I know what you did. I know about the special project. I know about the quarterly transfers, and I am not going to stop until everyone else knows too." He deleted the message, but his hands were shaking. The game was not over. It was just beginning. 6 months later. Marcus received a new assignment, Patterson County, Alabama. Similar patterns, similar complaints, similar silence from authorities who should have been paying attention. He would be an insurance adjuster this time. Relocating for work. A boring man with a boring job who happened to notice things. The cover was already in place. The documentation had already begun. The clock was already ticking. Before he left, he stopped by his mother's house one last time. She stood on the porch and watched him load his car. The same gray sedan, the same worn shoes, the same navy polo. But different somehow, harder, more certain. "How long this time?" "I do not know. 6 months, a year. However long it takes. And you will call? Every Sunday, just like before. She walked down the steps and hugged him, held him longer than usual. Be careful, Marcus. Always. And come home. I promise. He got in the car, started the engine, pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, he watched his mother standing on the porch, getting smaller, disappearing into the distance. He thought about all the people he had met in the past 15 months, the victims, the witnesses, the ones who had been brave, and the ones who had been broken. He thought about Rhonda Crewe, wherever she was, about Preston Hale, comfortable in his Virginia office, about the system that protected some people and crushed others. He thought about justice, about what it meant, about whether it was something that could be achieved or only pursued. And he kept driving, toward Patterson County, toward another investigation, toward another chance to make something right in a world that made it very hard to do so. The road stretched out ahead of him, empty, endless. He did not know what he would find, did not know who he would become, did not know if he would survive what was coming. But he knew one thing. He was not going to stop. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. The snakes were still out there. The system was still broken. The work was still unfinished. And Marcus Holloway was still fighting. Somewhere in Virginia, Preston Hale received another message. This one was longer, more detailed. It contained information that should have been impossible for anyone outside the network to know. Names, dates, account numbers, the location of records he thought had been destroyed. At the bottom, a single question. Do you know how many people have to disappear before someone notices the pattern? Hale stared at the screen. His comfortable retirement suddenly felt very fragile. He picked up the phone, dialed a number he had not used in years. We have a problem. The Holloway situation is not contained. The voice on the other end was calm, cold. Then contain it. He is FBI, Civil Rights Division. Civil. We cannot just make him disappear. Everyone can disappear, Preston. Everyone. It is just a matter of choosing the right moment. The line went dead. Hale set down the phone, walked to the window of his expensive office, looked out at the Virginia suburbs. Somewhere out there, Marcus Holloway was driving toward Patterson County, toward another investigation, toward another chance to expose things that powerful people wanted to stay hidden. The game was not over. It was just getting started. In Morrow County, Georgia, the consent decree was progressing. Body cameras were being purchased. Training programs were being implemented. The wheels of reform were turning, slowly, grudgingly, incompletely. In a conference room at the DOJ, Raymond Cross was still building his case against Hale's network, still documenting, still waiting for the break that would make prosecution possible. In Patterson County, Alabama, people who had never heard of Marcus Holloway were about to have their lives changed by a man they would know only as an insurance adjuster who asked too many questions. And in a cemetery outside Nashville, someone had placed flowers on an unmarked grave. No name, no dates, just a small stone with 2 letters carved into it. R.C. Rhonda Crewe was not forgotten. The truth she had tried to tell was still waiting to be heard, and somewhere, someone was still fighting to make sure it would be. The sun set over Georgia, over Alabama, over Virginia and Washington, and all the places where power accumulated and justice was rationed. Another day ended. Another night began. And in the darkness, the work continued. It always continued. It had to. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Because some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible. Because sometimes the only way to change a broken system was to refuse to stop trying. Marcus Holloway drove through the night, toward a county he had never seen, to fight battles he had not yet imagined. His mother was safe. His conscience was clear. his purpose was defined, and somewhere ahead of him, the truth was waiting. All he had to do was find it.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.